They laughed when I walked out, not because they knew what was coming, but because they didn't. The sound echoed through the glass hallway, soft at first, like the sound of heels on marble, then sharper, meaner, fading behind me as the door closed. They thought I was storming off in humiliation. They didn't know I was walking away with everything. My name is Danielle. I'm 32 years old, a senior analyst at the Charleston branch of Brindle & Co., and this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. It happened during the quarterly review, the one everyone dreaded, the one where the partners sat in a perfect row, expressionless, like jurors waiting for a confession, the one where every employee rehearsed their pitch under the sterile hum of fluorescent lights, praying the slides would load, that their charts would move in the right direction, that their voice wouldn't crack when Mark, the senior partner, interrupted with a question. That morning, the Charleston office looked like every office before a storm. Hushed, tense, too much perfume and burnt coffee in the air. People avoided eye contact in the hallway. Even the intern skipped the usual small talk at the Keurig. The smell of stress mixed with dry erase ink lingered everywhere. I'd been preparing all week. My power suit was ironed the night before, beige heels lined beside the door like armor, minimal makeup, hair slicked into a low twist. I wanted precision, control, invisibility until the moment I needed to be seen. The conference room was cold, always a few degrees lower than necessary, as if success required discomfort. The glass table stretched nearly 12 feet long, polished until the reflections looked sharper than the people sitting around it. My folder sat before me, labeled and color-coded, because control was my comfort language. I knew my numbers. I knew her numbers. And more importantly, I knew exactly what was about to happen. Across from me, Madison lounged in her chair like it was a photo shoot, latte in hand, silver bracelets clinking every time she gestured. She wore confidence like perfume, loud, synthetic, impossible to ignore. That same smirk played on her lips, the one she used when she slipped phrases from my pitch into hers, when she sent accidental copies of my reports to herself late at night, when she leaned too close to Liam's desk and left wearing his hoodie. She thought I didn't see. She thought I was naive. I adjusted my blazer sleeve, tucked a strand of hair neatly behind my ear, and waited. Danielle, you're up. The projector flickered to life. My laptop connected instantly, screen mirroring onto the massive display behind me. It was supposed to show my Q2 growth performance slide, the culmination of every late night, every skipped dinner, every calculation I'd redone twice to make sure the margins sang, but it didn't. The screen glitched once, then twice. A pause long enough for the room to frown. Then the image split down the middle, and there they were. Liam's face, Madison's voice, on a live video call. Her laugh filled the speakers, high and breathy, her tone too intimate for office air. He chuckled back, that same careless sound I used to hear across my kitchen counter. The words rolled out. You always look better when you're not pretending to work, babe. A ripple of confusion passed through the room. Someone near the end of the table whispered, Is this part of the deck? Another dropped a pen. The sound hit the floor like a gunshot in the silence. I didn't flinch. I stepped slightly aside, my heels firm on the tile, arms relaxed at my sides. The light from the projector washed over me, harsh and white, and I let it. Let the evidence glow 10 feet tall for every partner to see. Madison's laugh broke off when she realized what was happening. Her head snapped toward the screen, eyes wide, hand scrambling for her MacBook trackpad. But it was too late. The call was mirrored through my account, not hers, and the feed had already synchronized with the presentation setup. Her face pixelated as she tried to disconnect, a flash of panic cutting through her mascara-perfect confidence. Liam's voice stuttered mid-sentence. I stayed quiet. Because this wasn't an accident. 3 weeks earlier, I'd started noticing small inconsistencies. Files that wouldn't sync. Drafts missing from folders. Sent items I didn't remember sending. At first, I thought it was fatigue. Then I saw her presentation. Her slides carrying my client quotes, my phrasing, even the color palette I'd built from scratch. She'd stolen my work, packaged it, and smiled through it, so I smiled back and started building something better. I went to IT the next day, casual, unbothered, said I thought my shared device settings might be off. They ran a diagnostic and printed out the logs, IP addresses, login times, access paths. I studied the printout over lunch. Between two timestamps, I found her, the alias she'd used, the shared device linked to my folder, and an email forwarder connected to Liam's personal Google Drive. That's when the anger turned into focus. I didn't cry, didn't confront her, didn't text Liam the screenshots like some desperate warning. Instead, I wrote code, a simple Python script that would auto-trigger a mirroring function anytime a call was made from the proxy alias during a live presentation through the office Wi-Fi. I even gave it a name, Mirror Karma. For weeks, I waited. I let her get comfortable. I let her think she'd won. Today was the test. Madison lunged for her laptop, slamming the lid shut. The video froze mid-frame. Her face twisted between confusion and guilt. Liam's mouth open mid-word. For a moment, the whole room just stared at the still image, hovering over the words, executive summary. Then silence. Mark leaned forward, glasses slipping down his nose. His voice cut through the tension. What was that? My heartbeat was steady, calm. I turned toward him, my voice clear enough to slice through the air. That, I said, was an unauthorized personal call made from a company-linked device, and this, I clicked a folder on my desktop, is the activity log tracing stolen files, unauthorized access, and recorded proof of internal misconduct linked to that call. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Awkward curiosity turned to precision and consequence. Sandra from HR blinked, her hand already moving toward her phone. One of the partners whispered to another. Someone at the end of the table muttered, "Jesus." Madison's breath came out ragged. "She set me up," she shouted, voice trembling. "This is illegal." I tilted my head, calm as glass. "Only if you didn't sign the tech usage disclosure." She faltered. "You did," I added softly. "On your first day, I checked." Her eyes darted around the table, searching for an ally, for him. But Liam wasn't there. His chair was empty, because I'd removed him from the meeting invite list last night, right after blocking his email from the shared calendar. I didn't need him there. Not yet. Madison's face tightened. She looked like a person realizing the trap had always been visible, just disguised as her own reflection. Mark exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples. "Sandra," he said, "I think we'll need to review the HR protocols immediately." Sandra nodded, still staring at the frozen frame on the screen. Madison's voice cracked when she tried to protest again. "You can't! This isn't what it looks like!" But it was. Everyone in the room knew it, and the more she spoke, the more she buried herself. I closed my laptop with a soft click. The sound seemed louder than it should have been. I gathered my folder, adjusted my sleeve, and stood straight. My voice didn't waver. "My part's done," I said. Nobody stopped me as I walked out. I could feel their eyes on my back, the quiet awe of people who'd just watched an unexpected storm roll through. The glass door swung open, the cool air of the hallway met my face. Somewhere behind me, the projector flickered again, then went black. They didn't know it yet, but the presentation wasn't over. The files I'd submitted earlier that morning were still running the background processes. The internal audit had already begun. They'd find out soon enough. Because I wasn't walking away in defeat. I was walking away with control, proof, and a promotion waiting to happen. She tried to laugh it off, her voice trembling at the edges of confidence. It was the kind of sound you make when you know everyone's watching and you're not sure which version of yourself they'll believe. Madison always had that fallback mode. The flirty shrug, the "this is silly" grin. Like life was a stage she could improvise her way through. She'd used that same smile to get extensions from clients, to talk her way out of deadlines, to turn mistakes into miscommunications. But this time, it didn't land. Not with the screen frozen behind her, still showing Liam's half smirk and her own voice spilling through the speakers. Playful, intimate, undeniably unprofessional. Every pixel screamed guilt. The pale blue background of the company's logo sat like a watermark of irony behind their faces. The words, "Executive Summary" at the top of the slide looked almost like a title card to their own downfall. Mark didn't smile. His eyes narrowed behind his glasses, unreadable but dangerous. Sandra didn't smile either. She sat still, lips pressed together, already tapping something on her iPad. When HR stops smiling, you've already lost. Madison stepped back from the table, her heels clicking against the tile. She tried to collect her voice, muttering about boundaries and personal lives, like this was some awkward misunderstanding instead of corporate sabotage. "This was obviously manipulated," she said, laughing under her breath, though no one else joined. I stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that fills a room, heavy and deliberate. The fluorescent lights above hummed, steady and cold, their pale glow turning the conference room into something sterile, like a lab or a courtroom. The HVAC vent hissed softly near the window, the air conditioning kicking in again as if even the building needed a distraction from what was unfolding. Then Mark turned to me. His tone was measured, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. "Danielle," he said, "do you have all of it documented?" I nodded once. "Every file transfer," I said. "Every timestamp, every chat log forwarded to the wrong folder, and the master access key used to mirror my shared projects." A pause. Just long enough for everyone to realize this wasn't personal anymore. This was procedural. "She didn't just cheat on me," I continued quietly. "She cheated the company, and used my work to do it." Sandra's eyes flicked down to her iPad. Her lips moved slightly as she read. I recognized the rhythm, HR termination protocol. She was already moving through the checklist in her head: verification, device retrieval, exit interview, security escort. It was clinical, swift, and for a brief second, I wondered if Madison could see it happening. But I wasn't finished. I clicked again. The screen behind me changed. A second window appeared, a video playback box with a timestamp at the corner, 10:43 p.m., 3 nights ago. The office lights were dim, the space empty except for one figure at a desk: Madison. Her silhouette glowed faintly under the reflection of the computer screen. She was typing fast, focused. I knew that posture, the exact tilt of the head when she thought no one could see her. The video zoomed slightly as I adjusted playback speed. The cursor on her monitor blinked over a folder labeled Brindle Q3, Danielle Draft. She clicked, downloaded, then minimized the window and opened her email. A new message. The to field auto-filled itself. Liam's name. She attached the file, typed a quick message, and hit send. Silence. No one in the room breathed. Even the hum of the projector seemed to fade out, as if the air itself didn't want to intrude. Someone exhaled sharply, that involuntary sound people make when they witness a car crash in slow motion, half disbelief, half horror. It cut through the tension like a blade. Madison turned to me then, really turned. Gone was the charm, the entitlement, the subtle cruelty she'd worn like armor. What was left was fear, raw and naked, painted across her face. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger, someone she'd underestimated too long. "You planned this," she said, her voice cracking. "All of it." I met her eyes, calm, steady. "No," I said. "You did. You just didn't think I'd press play." Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, she didn't have a line ready. I should have felt triumphant, maybe even relieved, but all I felt was cold. That same kind of cold that settles in your chest when you realize love isn't loyalty, it's leverage. The same cold I'd felt the night I checked Find My iPhone and saw Liam's location vanish mid-route, his name replaced with no signal. The same cold when I asked him if he'd seen my draft proposal on our shared drive, and he laughed, said, "I don't really understand your work, babe." Except he did. He understood enough to send it to her. The betrayal hadn't arrived like a storm. It came in pieces, quiet, hidden in text messages, half-truths, late-night strategy calls. It chipped away until I didn't recognize what I was defending anymore, and standing there, I realized this wasn't revenge. It was reflection. A mirror turned back toward the people who built their power from mine. Sandra stood then, calm but authoritative. "Madison," she said, "I'm going to ask you to step outside while we review this internally." Madison blinked, disbelief widening her eyes. "You can't—" Sandra's voice didn't waver. "Now." Madison hesitated, looking around for backup. There was none. Even the junior associates, the ones who used to orbit her like satellites, kept their eyes down. She grabbed her laptop too quickly, slamming the lid shut. A sticky note dislodged from the back, drifting down like a feather before landing near her chair. It was yellow, creased at the corner. I recognized my handwriting immediately. "Danielle, 10 a.m. deck." My heart gave a small, bitter twist. She'd been using my templates too, copying even my notes, my timestamps, my outlines. I bent down, picked it up, smoothed the edge, and slipped it into my folder. My fingers brushed the paper longer than necessary. A strange mix of grief and clarity hit me at once. How something as small as a sticky note could hold the proof of months of manipulation. The room stayed silent. No one moved until Mark cleared his throat, the sound deep and weary. "Danielle," he said slowly, "are you still comfortable presenting?" I looked up. Around the table sat 12 executives, one HR lead. A screen that still showed a paused image of betrayal, frozen in corporate lighting, and the faintest scent of burnt coffee still clinging to the air. I took a breath. My pulse steadied. "Yes," I said. I walked to the head of the table, adjusted the clicker in my hand, and gestured toward the screen. "Slide 1, please." The frozen call dissolved, replaced by a clean white background, the title in bold navy font. Q2 Growth Overview, Charleston Division. As the numbers appeared, I started speaking, not from nerves, not from fear, but with a kind of clarity that only comes when there's nothing left to lose. Because while Madison's downfall had just begun, mine had already ended. The first slide lit up like it had been waiting for me all along. White background, crisp graphs, clean transitions, numbers lined up like soldiers. Cold, surgical, honest. But for the first time, it wasn't just a screen full of data. It was proof. Proof of what I'd built, what I'd survived, what I'd reclaimed. The room was silent, but it wasn't the awkward kind anymore. It was focus, stillness. Every gaze pointed toward me, not over me, not around me, at me. For years, I'd fought for that kind of attention. The kind that doesn't ask you to smile first, the kind that doesn't fade when someone louder enters the room. And now, standing under that sharp fluorescent light, I had it. My throat tightened, but I kept breathing. Slow, controlled. My hand hovered over the clicker like it was a trigger. I'd rehearsed this presentation a dozen times, but I hadn't rehearsed what it would feel like when every single person who once doubted me finally had to listen. I took a small step forward, my heels echoed on the glass floor. The slide behind me changed to a series of bar charts, regional growth, quarterly performance, resource realignment. The Charleston Division achieved a 12.8% recovery in operational losses post-Q1, I said, projected to stabilize above baseline by December. My voice didn't shake, not once. I walked them through the recovery plan I'd built, long before Madison had ever touched my spreadsheets. The one she'd skimmed and plagiarized in parts, never understanding the structure underneath. Every chart, every forecast on that screen was something she'd dismissed as too complex. But complexity was where I lived. I explained how I'd restructured vendor contracts, optimized workflow redundancies, and rerouted internal auditing. All while Madison spent her mornings at Liam's desk, her afternoons gossiping at the espresso bar, her evenings pretending to work late. Mark's expression softened as I spoke. It wasn't warmth exactly. Mark wasn't capable of that. But there was respect, the kind that doesn't come easy in boardrooms like this. Even Susan, the finance director with the endless pen-tapping habit, had stopped moving. Her eyes stayed on me the whole time. I could feel the room's attention locking in like gravity. Outside, Charleston sunlight leaked through the tall windows, painting geometric shadows across the floor. Dust drifted through the beams like suspended confetti, tiny, invisible applause. And yet, somewhere deep inside, another film kept playing. I was back in my apartment, late night, the glow of my monitor lighting up my face. That's when I saw it, the first sign. Madison's report draft in the shared drive. My exact phrasing. Cost to value inversion. My signature layout, even the typo I hadn't corrected yet. One word, reposition instead of repositioning. It hit me like static. Familiar. Wrong. I remember sitting there staring at the word until the letters blurred. My hand hovered over the mouse, trembling. That stupid typo, something I was embarrassed by, became my proof, my fingerprint. And that night, after hours of staring at it, I did what I always did when the world felt off balance. I brought him food. Liam's apartment smelled like coffee and cologne. I walked in holding a paper bag of Thai takeout, the plastic still warm. I wanted normal, a distraction, someone to tell me I wasn't imagining things. He was at the kitchen counter, eyes on his laptop. He didn't look up right away. I saw the faint glow of Messenger on the screen. Madison's name in the chat sidebar. A photo previewed, blurred but recognizable. He closed the laptop too quickly, too smoothly. "Just work stuff," he said, forcing a grin. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. He pulled me in, kissed me before I could ask again. His hands felt cold. The kiss felt like punctuation, like a period meant to end the question. And I let it. Because back then, I still thought love was something you preserved by ignoring the rot underneath. I sat across from him while he opened the food containers, acting like nothing was wrong. The steam rose between us, the air heavy with lemongrass and silence. I stared at him, memorizing his face, already knowing that someday soon I'd have to unlearn it. At work the next morning, I tried to convince myself I was overthinking. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe she just admired my phrasing. Maybe he was telling the truth. But the world has a cruel way of confirming what you already know. Every day after that, little things slipped. Liam's late replies, Madison's suddenly refined presentations, her knowing glances across the meeting table, and me, pretending not to notice, pretending it didn't sting every time they exchanged a look I wasn't meant to see. Funny how women get told we're too serious, too ambitious, too cold, as if competence itself is arrogance, as if confidence must be softened to make others comfortable. I used to shrink myself in those rooms, lower my tone, add apologies between my sentences. Not anymore. Now I let them see me. All of me. Unshrunk. I clicked through the final slide. Revenue projection curves, client retention forecasts, words I used to recite mechanically, now pulsing with meaning. When I finished, I didn't expect applause. It wasn't that kind of meeting, but the quiet nods meant everything. Mark leaned forward, arms crossed. "Solid," he said finally. "Actionable. Clean." Coming from him, it was almost poetic. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. The clicker felt lighter in my hand. When I returned to my seat, my fingers trembled. But it wasn't nerves anymore. It was release. My body catching up to what my mind already knew. This was the turning point. The hardest part, though, was still waiting outside that glass door. Because Liam hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't shown up since the meeting imploded. Not one apology. Not even a coward's excuse. It was almost poetic. The man who once filled my inbox now couldn't even send a full sentence. That night, the office emptied slowly. Laughter echoed faintly from the elevators. The janitor's cart squeaked down the hall. I sat in my car, parked in the underground garage, headlights off. The sound of my own breathing filled the space. The red light from my dashcam blinked steadily, watchful, patient, recording. My phone screen glowed against the dark interior. One unread message. His name. Liam. "Can we talk?" No punctuation, no apology. Just those 3 words. For a long minute, I stared at it. The same hands that once sent me "good morning" now sent me this. an afterthought, a request for control disguised as concern. I thought of Madison's frozen face on the projector, of the silence that followed, of the way power shifts quietly, almost invisibly, until you realize it's already in your hands. So I typed back, calm and deliberate. Me. Sure, Zoom, on your work email, 9 a.m. sharp. I hit send, watched the message turn from gray to delivered. Then I set the phone down on the passenger seat, leaned back, and let the hum of the air vents fill the car. He didn't know what was coming either. The next morning I wore the same navy blazer. Not out of laziness, out of intent. I could have chosen the gray one, the softer, neutral tone that said approachable, but I wanted precision, continuity, the same fabric, the same shoulders, the same quiet authority that had seen me through the day before. Let him see that nothing about me needed to change, that I didn't need reinvention to reclaim my power. Let him see the woman he discarded still, standing, still sharp, and utterly untouchable. The air outside was brisk, Charleston morning light cutting through the blinds of my apartment like glass. My coffee had gone cold on the counter, untouched. The city was already awake, traffic murmuring, the faint whistle of a bus somewhere down the street. But my world was narrowed to a single upcoming moment, 9 a.m. At 8:59, I clicked into the Zoom room, camera on, mic muted. The corporate logo flashed blue across my monitor as the virtual waiting room dissolved. My own reflection filled the top right corner of the screen. Hair neat, eyes calm, no tremor in my jaw. The navy fabric framed my face like armor. The clock at the corner of my screen ticked once, then twice. 8:59 shifted to 9, then 9:01. He joined 2 minutes late. Typical. Always arriving just late enough to make it seem like he'd been busy, important, distracted by things that didn't include me. His face appeared, pixelated at first, then clear. Same tousled brown hair, the kind that used to fall over his forehead when he pretended to be charming. The same jawline, now tight, working like he was chewing on guilt but hadn't decided whether to spit it out or swallow it whole. "Danielle," he said finally. His voice carried that tone I'd once mistaken for warmth. Smooth, measured, calculated. "You're on speaker," I said. "HR and legal are listening in." That part was a lie, but I delivered it like a fact. The words landed clean. His face flickered, eyebrows twitching, pupils darting slightly to the side as if trying to spot invisible listeners. The blood rushed to his ears, the flush creeping up the side of his neck. He straightened his posture, trying to look calm, trying to act like a man who hadn't just been cornered. He inhaled, steadied his voice, but it cracked around the edges. "Look, I never meant for you to find out that way," he said. "It's been complicated and—" "Don't," I cut in. "Don't insult me with complicated." The way I said it made him blink. "You used my work," I continued. "You forwarded confidential reports to Madison. You logged into the firm's shared folders from your personal Gmail. Do you want me to keep going?" The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that sits in your throat, daring you to breathe wrong. He froze, eyes darting sideways as though someone might whisper him a script. He thought he had time to spin a story. He always thought he could talk his way out. But this time, I wasn't giving him space to lie. I leaned slightly forward, voice low but steady. "You said you didn't understand my work, but somehow you understood it enough to forward strategy decks to someone who couldn't even run her own filters." His mouth opened, then closed. Tried again, faltering. "She said you were burning out," he muttered finally, "that you didn't trust her, or the team, that you were paranoid." There. It was. The gaslight grenade. Lit. Tossed. The word paranoid hung between us like smoke, the kind that chokes before it burns. I didn't flinch. I smiled instead. Small. Controlled. "She also said she got those decks approved on her own," I said quietly. "Except the metadata says they were authored by me. And your email was the one that uploaded them. So tell me again, am I paranoid? Or did I just follow the wire you left dangling?" He exhaled sharply, shoulders slumping. The charm peeled away, revealing something smaller underneath. Fear. His voice dropped an octave, almost a whisper. "You set me up." I tilted my head just slightly. "No," I said. "You set yourself up. I just built a mirror." And for a moment he was silent. Not defensive, not angry, just still. The kind of silence where people finally see themselves for what they are and hate what's looking back. The light from his side flickered. Maybe sunlight. Maybe the glow of a screen he'd forgotten to turn off. His expression looked older, smaller. I could see him thinking, counting all the ways he could have prevented this, all the ways he thought I'd stay quiet. I leaned forward, elbows resting on the desk, tone even. "The firm is deciding how to handle your breach," I said. "They don't want bad press, but you'll never work with one of our clients again. Madison's already on unpaid leave. And as for you and me," he swallowed hard. "Danielle, we're done, Liam, not just personally, but professionally, socially, completely." For a second, he looked like he might beg. Then his jaw clenched instead. A whisper left his lips, sharp, venomous, a curse meant to sting, but I never heard it clearly. I clicked end meeting before it landed. The call screen went black. My reflection came into focus on the glossy surface of my laptop. The same navy blazer, the same calm eyes, the faintest trace of exhaustion beneath them. I stared for a long moment. My face didn't look triumphant, just steady, still, alone, but never more powerful. The sound of my own breathing filled the room. Outside the window, sunlight fractured across the glass buildings downtown, scattering over parked cars and office facades. The city kept moving, indifferent, and that indifference was comforting. I shut the laptop gently, the click echoing like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. Then I reached for my coffee cup. It was cold now, but I drank anyway. The bitterness grounded me. By early afternoon, my inbox began to flicker with new messages. Most of them automated, meeting summaries, internal memos. But then, a Slack ping appeared in the corner of my screen. Susan, the executive who never used more than 5 words at a time. Her message read, "Smart move. You earned this." I stared at it for a moment, unsure whether to smile. Praise from Susan was rarer than warmth from Mark. She didn't waste words. If she said something, it meant she meant it. Before I could type a response, another ping appeared. "Mark, come by my office when you're free. Let's talk next steps." The words sat on the screen, glowing against the white background. My pulse quickened. For months, I'd been surviving in damage control, patching leaks, keeping myself composed while the floor tilted beneath me. I'd been guarding my work, guarding my name, guarding my sanity. I never thought beyond that. Now, for the first time, there was something waiting beyond defense. Opportunity. I sat back in my chair, letting the realization settle. Maybe this was how power actually worked, not as an explosion, but as a shift, a quiet redirection of gravity when suddenly you realize the ground beneath you isn't shaking anymore, it's holding you up. I closed my eyes just for a second and inhaled deeply. The faint scent of coffee, perfume, and printer ink filled the air. Ordinary smells, a normal day. Except everything had changed. The door I'd been guarding so desperately, the one that led back to the version of me who tolerated betrayal, who apologized for ambition, who waited for validation, was behind me now. And the door Mark had just opened? It led somewhere I'd never been allowed to stand before. I waited until the sun dipped behind the Charleston skyline before heading to Mark's office. The light outside had softened to gold, stretching long shadows down the glass corridor. The hum of the building had quieted, the printers silent, the chatter gone, the coffee machines cooling. What was left was the kind of stillness that feels earned after a day that changed everything. My heels clicked softly on the polished floor, echoing between the framed client milestones that lined the hallway. Photos of campaigns, partnerships, smiling executives, every success branded with names that weren't mine. But as I passed each one, I couldn't help but think how many of those victories had my fingerprints hidden behind them. My research, my words, my hours, my silence, all rebranded under someone else's name. Until today. Mark's door was open, just a sliver. He didn't look up when I knocked. "Close the door, Danielle," he said, voice even. I did. The sound of it clicking shut behind me felt heavier than usual, like sealing something off, an ending, or maybe a beginning. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, glasses resting low on his nose. The glow from the city lights outside reflected against the window behind him, casting faint ripples across the wood of his desk. He studied me for a moment, not the way some men study women, curiously, distracted, but the way a strategist studies a move they hadn't seen coming. "You're calm under pressure," he said finally. "Strategic. Not vindictive, but exact. We need that." He wasn't paying me a compliment. Mark didn't do compliments. He was diagnosing, calculating where I fit next. I stood still, hands clasped, lightly in front of me, waiting. He exhaled slowly. "We're reassigning Madison's portfolio," he said. "I'd like you to take point. You'll report directly to me. Susan will loop you into partner track briefings next quarter." Partner track. The words almost didn't register. For years, they'd been whispered like myth, something other people reached for, the kind of people who had networks, mentors, unspoken protection. I had only ever had my work. My throat tightened, not with tears, not with pride, something quieter, the rare pulse of validation that doesn't demand applause. "I'm ready," I said simply. He nodded once. I figured. And that was that. No handshake, no small talk, just a decision, clean and irreversible. When I stepped out of his office, the hallway lights had dimmed to their evening setting. Soft amber, the kind that makes everything feel cinematic. Susan was walking toward me, her usual iced coffee in hand, condensation trailing down the plastic cup. She didn't stop, just brushed past, voice low but deliberate. "They turned your screen into a crime scene," she said. "You turned the meeting into their public reckoning." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The words landed like a closing gavel. Final. Exact. By the time I reached the parking lot, the sky had shifted to indigo. Streetlights blinked on one by one, reflections rippling across the hood of my car. The air smelled faintly of salt and jasmine, that familiar Charleston blend of beauty and decay. Later that evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine. The city hummed below. Boats pushing along the Cooper River, laughter spilling from rooftop bars, the occasional honk from a late commuter. The skyline flickered through the dusk haze, little points of light marking every building where people were still fighting for something. I thought about the first day I joined the firm, about the elevator ride where I'd rehearsed my introduction twice, about how I'd walked into that first meeting clutching my notepad too tightly, how I avoided eye contact when Madison smirked across the table, how she told me once. Like she was doing me a favor. You don't have to prove yourself so hard. But that's what she never understood. I wasn't proving anything. I was surviving. And now? Now I was rewriting. I unlocked my phone and stared at my lock screen. A photo of Liam and me in Asheville stared back, smiling, windblown, a version of me that thought partnership meant peace. I held it for a few seconds before changing it, swapped it for a screenshot of my presentation slide, the one that followed the exposed call. The clean, crisp chart titled Q2 Growth Overview, Charleston Division. Not because I was proud of what happened, but because I survived it. Because that slide wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. Every time I'd look at it, I wanted to remember. She stole my story. I rewrote the ending. He called me too ambitious. I called him unemployed. They mocked my quiet. I let the silence speak louder than them. I leaned back in my chair, the night air brushing against my skin. Somewhere across the street, someone was playing a slow jazz track. The notes drifted up faintly, soft and melancholic. It made me think of the space between what's lost and what's learned. I didn't forgive them. I didn't hate them either. Hate requires energy. Forgiveness requires belief. I had neither left to spare. What I had now was distance, and distance, I learned, can be its own kind of peace. I took another sip of wine, the glass cold against my fingers. For the first time in months, I didn't check my email, didn't draft a reply, didn't monitor what anyone else was doing. The city kept breathing, and I let it. When the clock on my wall clicked over to midnight, I turned off the balcony light and stood in the dark, looking at my reflection in the sliding glass door. I didn't look like the woman from 6 months ago, the one who second-guessed her sentences, the one who apologized for taking up air in a room she helped build. Now, the reflection staring back at me was clear. I don't ever want to be the woman who watches herself disappear in someone else's version of her life. I went inside, set my phone face down on the counter, and let the silence fill the room, steady, whole, mine. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.